This is the 8-9 Combo Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones.
This is the 8-9 Combo. I'm Brett McKay and Harry Jones. We are back after another one of these weird rugby-free weekends.
How's it, Brett? I love this week because it's all black Springboks. I love the weather I'm in currently because I'm about to be in better weather. I actually love our logo. Our new logo, which comes on the beginning of our YouTube presentation, is superb. I love everything. Right now, I feel like I'm in love with rugby. Yeah. I also love someone that you don't love that much. He is the guy who is currently wowing New Zealand rugby audiences. He just beat the Waikato, led by Aaron Cruden. He made breaks. He finished breaks. He put his wing to score, and then he converted from the touchline. His name is Tane, the Red Admed. And when you learn to love him, your life will get better as well.
Is that right? Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind. I still haven't got around to watching a North Harbour game, but I must do something about that. We're up to episode 29 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby podcast, and we are really pleased to be brought to you through the Rugby Championship by Chasing the Sun 2, the fantastic 5-part all-access series documenting South Africa's journey to their memorable 2023 Rugby World Cup win, and which is coming soon to RugbyPass TV worldwide. Just head to rugbypass.tv and sign up for a free week and watch the first series from 2019 already. And it is time to start the rugby week, mate, with cheers and jeers. We do. Have you just done your cheers already? Have you gone off early?
No, I'm full of cheer.
Right.
I also want to say that I love the fact that we're in the black and that when I travel now around the world, it's actually not bankrupting you. This is also something to love. My cheers, mate, is that I don't think sometimes we have enough Harry in our diet, in our life. And so I just think it's great that the All Blacks retained the pride of St. Peter's College, 7 for 7 in the Super Rugby Pacific Final. Harry, the under-20s All Black guy, plumber. When you have a problem, when you got a break in the plumbing, send the plumber. And Harry Plummer could play 15 or 10, and I just think he's going to be on the field in Cape Town. Shock, revelation.
Has played plenty of 12 for the Blues as well. So, yeah. My family will argue that there is more than enough Harry in my life. my cheers for you is a bit of a funny one, and I'm not sure whether I'm okay with this or whether I'm a bit confused by this. And
this is going to be good.
Yeah, so you sort of know it. The Telegraph in London reported on Sunday that David Nucifora, now ex-Ireland HP manager, former Brumbies Wallabies coach from way back when, has or will take up an HP advisory role. Who has taken up, I should say, a HP advisory role with Rugby Australia, is set to do exactly the same thing with Scotland. And I mean, I suppose it's possible, and different countries have different HP advisory needs, but Scotland hosts Australia in 3 months' time. Like, is this completely kosher? And then and this is what I'm confused about. Rugby Australia confirmed that Nucifora is actually going to finish up with them in November. So suddenly the Scotland job makes sense. But then, consultants have got a consultant and all that sort of stuff. But I don't recall it ever being suggested that David Nucifora was joining Rugby Australia on a 6-month contract. So something doesn't smell right in the state of Denmark about this.
I've learned something. When in the same sentence, pathways, align, and stakeholders exist, that everything is bullshit. And it's just a way to give your mate some money in a job where you say high performance. High performance of what? Like, which players? I don't know who you're picking, so who do I pick? I'm gonna get everyone to have higher performance. Come on, it's just. I think there is a job. There's a thing there that takes 6-7 years. It doesn't happen in 3 or 4 months. So that was just completely ridiculous. No. Yeah.
Also, they literally hired a HP director. Anyway. Another favourite guest of ours returns, and we can't wait to speak with him again, even if theoretically, probably, it should have already happened by now this year. He is up next.
Logo.
Look at that. Logo. Love
Professional.
It. We are so YouTubers right now. This week's guest is not former Los Pumas centre, now ESPN commentator, and the official Argentinian friend of the pod, Marcelo Bosch. A sudden unavailability means that we've had to push Cello back to next week, and we look forward to speaking to him between the two Argentina-Australia's tests. But this week's guest is still a friend of the pod, and indeed a very good rugby mate of Harry's and mine. He's one of the best rugby writers we know, author of the book A World in Union/Conflict, and the brains behind the weekly column The Wrap every Monday on the Raw. It's only appropriate that we bring him back for his 8-9 debut, and we owe him beers for the rest of 2024 for being available for us at very short notice. And it is a warm welcome and sincere thanks to Geoff Parkes. Hello, mate. Welcome back. How are you?
Hello, gents. It has been a while, but we always said that I'd come back on the pod after David Nucifor's work with Rugby Australia was done. So here we are. We didn't even know it had started, and we certainly didn't know it was a fixed term. And now it's already over. So what can you say? The one thing we do know for sure is, as Harry said, that communication that came out of RA today that dribbled out. I think the pigeon had a bit of a limp on it, and I wouldn't be putting a whole lot of stake in everything that was said today.
Yes, it was over before it even began. It's a funny old situation, that, no doubt. It's we're back in after one of these funny travel weekends that is kind of included in the Rugby Championship out of necessity by virtue of having combatants in the four corners of the globe. But how was your rugby free weekend, Geoff? Have you been able to reset and get ready for what is actually a pretty big weekend of rugby this weekend coming? Yeah,
look, I think in our lives, there is no such thing as a rugby free weekend, is there? There's weekends when there's no live test rugby on or live super rugby, but it's never rugby free. And that's the way it should be. What a sad life it would be if that wasn't the case. So
it's very true.
If we're not thinking about what we're watching, we're thinking about what we just watched, or we're thinking about what we're about to watch. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
I think it used to be that we all knew the assistant coaches for our own teams. They tended to come, they were mates from way back of the head coach. Now in rugby, you actually follow soap operas across the globe of assistant coaches coming and going. So there's really never a free weekend.
It's been a rough week for assistant coaches, hasn't it?
It sure has.
Oh dear. Leon McDonald departs New Zealand. Felix Jones departs England. We'll get onto that at different points, I'm sure.
It's not all bad. I got a message just before from an assistant coach, and he's off to sunny Fiji to new pastures there. Tim Sampson, all the best to Tim,
yes.
if you're listening. And so not every assistant coach is going out the back door. Some of them have got good stories to tell.
Yeah, no, very happy for Tim, and he could do anything with the Druid next year in Super Rugby Pacific too, no doubt about that. Round 3 of the Rugby Championship. It's, as I mentioned in the intro, Geoff, it's got a bit of mouth-watering to it this weekend. South Africa, New Zealand at Ellis Park, Argentina, Australia in La Plata, and both those games seem as important for the two combatants as each other. I mean, Harry is basically salivating for 10 days out about the Boks and the All Blacks at Ellis Park. You are packed ready to go, aren't you?
My packing habits are very last minute. I have a go bag at all times. But, I'll be on the plane Wednesday nights. This is one of those rivalries that makes rugby. You exhaust all metaphors when you discuss All Black Springboks, and it's because the rivalry has gone through so many twists and turns. I always liken it to a sibling rivalry. In a sibling rivalry, you have the older brother who has superior muscle tone and has some tricks and psychological warfare, but it runs out at some point. And then, in this rivalry, they switch roles. So, don't get too hung up on the one role. But, there was a time from, say, late 90s through 2018 where clearly the All Blacks were the older brother. They just had the ability to win the close matches. 2013, great match, Ellis Park, wonderful. Oh, but the All Blacks win. And it just seemed like that. Since 2018, it's been 5-5-1. That's the record, win, loss, and draw. And even the ones that were wins were just by the skin of our teeth, back and forth. Yep. All of them had contentious moments. All of them had, that's the sign of a great rivalry is, oh, should this have happened? Should that have happened? So it's always that time in, they call it inflection points in business. I hate the term. It sounds like a Nusafora term. But the idea where you have the younger brother go, oh, wait, I could break his arm. Oh, wait, I won that fight in the backyard. Is it real? Am I good enough? And I think the tentativeness about the Springbok feeling of maybe we're better, it's not fully hold. It's not there yet. It's kind of like on the teeter. I think New Zealand would think, no, we should have won that World Cup final. That's why this positions itself, Geoff, as a particularly interesting chapter in the rivalry, where New Zealand is sort of holding on to something. They're the historical favorites, but you have the Springboks on the ascendancy, and it feels like they're going up. Both sides have plenty of injuries and missing players. What are you looking at? How are you looking at this match coming up this weekend?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is sort out, who's actually got the underdog status. I was expecting to come on here and fight with you, Harry, for 15 minutes about who's the underdog.
If we're going into that, I'm going to go and make a cup of tea, all right? I'll come back in 10 minutes. You can get it all sorted.
I'm pumped for this. There's something really special about Ellis Park, as you said, Harry. All Blacks versus Boks. You think about some of the fantastic stuff we've seen on there. Today I was thinking about this. Kieran Reid running down the sideline there at the end of that match. What an epic game it was. What an epic finish it was. Even we go back to 95 and now, I don't even think about the World Cup final. I think about Kevin Foote coaching Matt Damon to tackle like Francois Pienaar. So it's all Ellis Park. It's all Boks versus ABs. It's something else. It transcends Test rugby, really. And even though we were in Paris the last time they met, it wasn't Ellis Park. It was Stade de France. But it was still the same feeling. The two heavyweights going toe to toe, just a point in it. What else can you ask for? So I'll tell you what, though, and a little bit more serious. If we look at that last match, we go back to that. The All Blacks this time are without Whitelock, Retallick, Frizzell, Smith, Moanga. That's a third of the starting lineup, including some all-time greats. South Africa have a lot more continuity. The new players they're bringing in, they're doing by choice or by form or by whatever it is. So, I think even though it's an important game, it always is, if New Zealand doesn't win, I don't think they'll be beating themselves up too badly. The press and the public will. We know that. But I think unless it's a bad loss, no one wants a bad loss. But that is a lot of firepower to take out of one team from one game to the next. They've only had 5 matches since then. A new coach, still finding his feet, obviously, with respect to the Leon McDonald situation. So I think that is enough for the All Blacks to genuinely claim underdog status. It doesn't mean they can't win. They certainly can. But whatever happens, we know it's going to be epic, and that's fantastic.
I've immediately thought of something that we can ask for, Geoff, when you said there before, there's not much more you can ask for. Listening to you both talk about this for the last few minutes, all I can think about is I can't recall in any marketing, any of the social media promotion, anything. I don't think I've heard the words World Cup final rematch. It hasn't come up, and maybe it's because everyone knows that that's what it is, but that should be the selling point of this game, as if it needs selling, and we just haven't got it. And it just carries on this conversation we've been having for the best part of 6 weeks going into this Rugby Championship, Harry.
Yeah, so I think, Geoff, growing up in New Zealand, you would have had this sort of thought, which was the unofficial way we thought about it, which it was always the unofficial World Championship. That's denigrating of others. We totally understand that. It's disrespectful. I know. But over the course of 140 years, it kind of operated as that. And so there's never needed to be a rugby championship for this thing to be big. There's never needed to be a vehicle or a platform or a tournament so even if you say go back to the World Cup final, I mean, I know that upped the ante, but it was still an All Blacks Springboks match on a neutral field, which is in and of itself kind of cool. And so I don't know about you, but I don't think anyone needed any extras to rev up for this match. And you've just written about the pressure. There is some pressure on Razor, and the pressure seems to be manifesting itself. How closely do you think New Zealand rugby folk, the actual people on the ground, are watching this match? How big a deal is this?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious thing to say is, like you just said, it is a big deal because all of these games always are big deals. But this one in particular, you know what? I actually think it's less of a big deal than next week will be. So if that makes any sense. So, if New Zealand do happen to lose this week, I don't think that'll be a calamity for the reasons I said before about the continuity. But it will be potentially a calamity if they drop
lose next
the
week.
Second game.
Yeah. At sea level in Cape Town, that would be 4 in a row. 4 losses in a row to Springboks, which would be, I don't know if that's a record, but it must be close.
It would be close, and then that's sending a message. You throw in the loss to Argentina, and suddenly Razor, he is under a lot of pressure. Then he's at the moment he's just under a normal amount of pressure, which is probably a whole heap. But he'll be under real pressure if they lose twice. But we've seen the side react to that. They went there last year and lost badly. And then we had the whole thing about saving Ian Foster's job, and the side responded, and they responded in a tremendous way. That was another epic Test match. So I don't want to look too far ahead, but what I do want to say is, I don't think this week, win or lose, will be as big as the following week.
And I think some of the changes are interesting, right? So the Springboks can play different styles against other teams. But just like my sibling analogy, it seems like when you're fighting with your older brother or younger brother, you revert back to type. And so even though I think Springboks have been playing speedboks and being very expansive, I think it's almost like we cannot help ourselves. The All Blacks will try to tire out the very quick Springbok forwards. The Springboks will try to monster the very tough and strong Tamaiti. I mean, it's just kind of, we go back to the same old. But just to make my tiny underdog argument here, Geoff, I'll give you some revelations, Brett, and these are behind the scenes camp. This is behind the scenes camp news. They're not even out reported. So Eben Etzebeth is out. He has a back strain, and hear me out. It's not that we cannot afford to lose one. It's that the lock superiority was one of the things Geoff was alluding to. Brody Retallick and Sam Whitlock out. With Eben out, Lewitt out, Franco Mostert out, you might see a guy like Nicolas Jansen van Rensburg calling the lineouts as a starting lock. So I'm just saying there's some interesting parameters there. And also that means that the 7-1 bench comes into play. I know the 7-1 bench, everyone's scourge. And you might see a guy like Peter Steph Toy playing lock. So there's some mixes and matches here that are interesting. I don't think that's necessarily bad for Rassie. I think Rassie is wanting to get away from incumbency where everyone has a nailed on, I own the 1 jersey, you own the 4 jersey, you own the 6 jersey. In that, it's only Peter Steph Toy, Eben, France, and probably Peter. Yeah, that's about it. And maybe Delende. But beyond that, he wanted to have 2 or 3 at each position.
Yeah.
So to your point, this is interesting, this first test, because it should be a high-speed test. Ellis Park, the scores are always big, and everyone's going to have a chance to look at people like Sasha, Feinberg, Ngomuzulu, and other people that we haven't seen that much. I think New Zealand probably is looking forward to that. From our side, we we just don't know who Sam Derry is. We don't know who, like we haven't seen that. We haven't seen those guys mount up. So there's plenty here that can give both sides underdog status. But the All Blacks are always the favorite in every match they play. That's like the sun and the moon and the stars, sunrise, sunset. There's just no way to escape it until you finally relinquish that title.
Yeah, just on the locks, I think it is a good point you make, and I think that will feed into, it has implications for New Zealand selection, right? So, yeah, I think there is the New Zealand line out at the moment's a bit flaky, and we've seen that this year. We know both the hookers have their moments. It used to be like that with South Africa too, and Malcolm Marx in particular has really improved that over the last few years. So there was a bit of talk about Scott Barrett playing 6 because New Zealand needs the height to counter the pressure that they'll come under at line-out time. And if he doesn't play 6, then their line-out's vulnerable. But, it may well be looking at South Africa's team that they don't have to do that. So all of this will play out in the next couple of days or not. The other point you made about, different styles, this being good for Rassie, having to dig a bit deeper into a squad. One thing about South Africa, and it seems a bit trite to criticise the world champions, for a while now, but they really, if there's one chink in their armour, it is that they have been just playing one way to win, and it's a high risk game because you're only going to win by narrow margins. Now the fact is they did win, and they won by narrow margins right through the playoff games at the World Cup. But we all know it doesn't take much to turn one of those wins into a loss. And they could have lost any of those playoff games, but they didn't, and that's why they're the champs. But, I think moving forward, it is to South Africa's benefit that they add more strings to their bow. They have to do it. They're in the process of doing it. They've got the players to do it. They've got the coaches to do it, and they should do it, and they'll be better for it.
Harry, where's in your lock conundrums at the moment, and I presume there'll be some sort of public notice this week calling all locks to Ellis Park this weekend to help fill a hole. Where's Guess Neiman up to?
So Pork Chop, my friend Pork Chop, tells me that he was wearing a moon boot yesterday at the hotel in Josie. So is
this like my friend Bob Sacramento?
It's right. You'll see. Archie is pulled up lame, so literally the lock crisis is real. To Jeff's point, here's the difference. Here's what can happen. Peter Steph came up as a lock. He played a lot of games as a lock, so he's definitely going to be a lock. You pair him up with a line-out caller like Nico Janse van Rensburg. He plays for Montpellier and was the line-out caller in the French system, where, Paul Willemse doesn't get lifted. Nico was the one being lifted at playing a big 6. So I think you pair 2 big 6s, 2 big blindsiders at lock. Ben Jason Dixon, who we sung the praises of, is also lock height and can play alongside Peter Steph, and you have an all work rate. And then Elrich Lowe is tall enough to be a lock and plays lock sometimes for the Bulls. So you have options. Given the 7-1 bench, you just tell everyone to exhaust themselves. As long as you have one proper line-out caller, you're probably okay. But it is interesting to watch, to see that you might have a finishing locking duo of 2 blindsiders against whoever the All Blacks have. Yeah.
Do you genuinely think you'll go 7-1?
I think they will, for sure. They'll just have Grant Williams at backup 9. He plays a wing. He can play a wing. Kobus is also, wing speed. You have Cheslin Colby has had plenty of time now, either involuntary or planned at 9. So I think they can make that work. And the plus side of 7-1 is about the exhaustion factor of forwards, where you can just tell a guy,
just
you
empty the tank.
Don't have to worry. Yeah.
Yeah. The South African team will be named in the next 20 minutes probably. Geoff, what are you expecting from the All Blacks come Thursday when they name their team?
Well, I mentioned the conundrum around the tall timber and Barrett coming back in, whether he goes straight to 6. There was definitely improved performance in the second match against Argentina from Tupou Vaa'i. Darry's had a great introduction to Test rugby.
He has. He's been really good.
Yeah, there'll be a temptation to leave both those guys where they are and play Barrett at 6. But, you know, that might not happen. Barrett goes to lock and they stick with the loose forwards that they've got. Blackadder's got the work rate. Severe, obviously, with everything that he brings. So, but they would be down a little bit. They don't have that Frizzell sort of, you know, and how many years on are we still saying Jerome Kaino? You know, New Zealand has this fixation with having this big hard bone 6, and we don't, you know, there isn't really one there at the moment, right? And Frizzell was thought to be that guy, and he's out of the picture now. So, so there is. Yeah,
when you have Papali'i, Blackadder, and Savia as a loose trio, it's almost like they're all the same. Or they could all play all 3 of those positions.
Well, so that's what I'm wondering. If they move Scott Barrett to 6, does Blackadder switch to open side?
Yeah, he would play before Dalton. I would expect. Yeah. And that feels like a better balanced side to take in, to South Africa. You know, we're talking horses for courses, but. You know, we'll see. It's early days yet. I don't think anyone's really got a handle on Razor's sort of, you know, particular selection. I'm not sure he does yet, right? So you know, that's just going to have to take a bit of time to play out. I don't think we're going to see any surprises in the back line. You know, this will be a great test for Damien McKenzie at 10 because. You know, obviously with the line speed that we know the Boks are going to bring, does McKenzie back a skill, play Super Rugby style, try and beat it, or does he do what he was clearly told to do against Argentina, and the conditions helped in the second match, and play territory and kick every time from his own half, and you know. It's hard to say. He'll follow team instructions, but you know, he is that kind of guy. If there's a sniff of something on, you know, he can't help himself, and he'll either come up diamonds or he'll come up rocks, and you know, that's just how he does it. So, but what we do know is that he will have the opportunity, and I think it's fantastic that he does. Extremely talented guy, but. This will either be the making or breaking of him at this high level.
He'll follow his team instructions, except when it comes to airport transfers.
Yeah, there's no better test for a fly-off like Damien than to go up against the Blitz D. What's interesting is, to me, he's been told to kick 35 times in a successful test against Argentina. The Boks, you know, to your point about having a different way to win, have built a lot of their tries from counter. A lot of their tries have come from loose kicks. So there's this kick to make you kick back to me thing. And so I don't think they'll be mad about the idea of Damien McKenzie kicking more. I think that they're going to want to set up a formation. Tony Brown's been good at this at formation. And that comes down to sort of Vili or Sasha, where you're not relying on the 10 to create so many tries. I would think then you're looking at the All Blacks and saying, who's my wing on defense? I mean, I know that Talea, Clark, Reese, they're all fantastic attackers, Will Jordan, but it's more on the turnaround and scramble or the counter, the defense of a counter. How do you see that, Geoff? And who do you think that the back 3 is supposed to be, and does Will Jordan feature?
Jordan will come in for sure, and I imagine he'll play on one wing. So, you know, if it was me, I think Caleb Clark's had a great year, and I would have him in. He's fit, he's fast, he's powerful. I don't think they'll go that way. I expect they'll go with Talia ahead of Reese anyway. And, you know, and we need to get guys on the right side of the field. You know, we've had this big thing about interchangeability in the back 3. And that's okay up to a point. But, you know, it's clear that some of these guys are are more comfortable on one side than the other. So I expect it'll be Talia, Jordan, and Beauden Barrett.
Jordan will definitely play right side.
Yeah.
He just will. Yeah.
Yeah. The last time they faced each other, Will Jordan was the target for those kicks and those counters I'm talking about, because Will Jordan is an attack-minded guy. And I think playing in his career at club level, he hasn't had to be under the pump that much. It's not like something that you learn easily unless you're playing in a team that has to defend. So I think that's where it'd be green lights. Yeah.
Because the Crusaders
if we go back to the opening match of the World Cup, my memory's a little hazy, but I think he dropped the high ball in that match against France. Yeah, and it was costly. So he'll come under pressure for sure. I like your point, Harry, about the willingness and the ability of the Springbok backfield to run the ball back.
Yeah,
it's almost like we've come, half a circle there with, that was always the rule against New Zealand, no loose kicking to the back, and now. And why not, with all the elusiveness that they have if Sasha's back, the two wingers, they are they're fantastic broken field runners. So why wouldn't you run it back?
And you can see them doing it. You can see LaRue and Colby particularly will drop back to where they want to attack from, and they'll make you kick to them.
Yeah.
Like, okay, all right.
Yeah, that's right.
That's really how you're going to kick, and that's really how you're going to chase that. Okay, just going to weave through here, and off we go. And
and what I've been told is that Billy is the guy basically saying to the other, I call them Lekkerbacks, is there's going to be 4 or 5 of those in a game. Against the All Blacks, maybe only 3. And he's going to put the call on, and they're going to go. And they'll go so instantaneously, it'll remind you, to Jeff's point, of Beauden Barrett 6 years ago. Maybe it was Beauden Barrett against England. There was sort of a comeback of that idea of it was all go. Like, you knew from the second England put a loose kick up. The Boks rely on Damien having a few of those loose kicks because he just doesn't have his calibration set sometimes. He's much more comfortable on the foot running than he is sometimes on the diagonals and the grubbers. So one grubber too many or one little chip kick over, a guy like Sasha is going to love that little chip kick over. He can catch it hot volley, kind of like Beauden Barrett, and then just steam. Yeah, that's probably going to be 4 or 5 times in the whole match that there might be something on. I think the team that converts those, could have that early start. And both these teams have had, quick starts in 2023. There was one match that New Zealand did, one match the Springboks did, and then there was the final where no one did.
Yeah. I'm not going to ask either of you to pick a winner because that seems pointless, but I'm interested in margins. How big how tight or how loose do we see this game being?
You might as well ask us to pick a winner. It's it's all crystal balling, isn't it? No, I'd expect it's going to be a tight game. I know we had one match last year that was a blowout, but that's pretty rare. That is an outlier, and we've had one outlier, obviously, which I, don't really want to remind Harry of, but at Albany, but those are outliers. They only happen every now and again. So I'd expect it'll be a tight match either way.
I think tight, but I think high scoring. Both teams have been scoring tries, 9 tries each scored. Only 1 conceded for the Boks. That could be an element of the weather and a beginning Wallabies team. But even looking at the whole year as a whole, I think the teams have shown an ability to score. I actually think, and this is a little bit maybe counterintuitive, I think the defense of the All Blacks is the key here. Like, it's sort of switched around.
No doubt.
I think All Blacks have been leaking some tries that they wouldn't normally leak. And I think that's where I would see maybe a high-scoring game with both teams able to match back and forth.
Probably. Sorry, Brett. Just the last one on that is line out maul defence, right? And even though there'll be some changes for the Springboks this week in the locking, I don't expect that'll make them any less potent when it comes to 5-metre line out. So. Both sides will be desperate not to concede 5-metre lineouts. And no matter how good you are, you're always vulnerable. And any side's vulnerable. It only takes a defensive guy just to slip past, or get bound too quickly or slightly too slowly, and then the whole defensive pattern for that maul is gone. And then you're at risk of
spun around
conceding an easy try or a penalty try or whatever. So I think that's a key part of the game.
It's spun around like Carlo Tizzano in Perth. I reckon. I think margin-wise, Harry, this first game anyway, it feels like New Zealand win it by a converted try, but South Africa wins it by maybe 15. That's how I see it swinging at the moment.
I mean, if I had gun to my head predict, I would say Boks win by about 5 or 6. But mostly because of a good start. And I think then New Zealand puts all the pressure on in the end. And I think, and unlike maybe 2 years ago where there was this, breakout, I don't think that breakout happens. I think the Bok defense has been pretty stingy. That all rests, again, on kicking because someone's got to make some kicks. So if it's not just starting, he's got to make his kicks. One of Jeff's favorite subjects is line kicking. If you get a scrum penalty, Andre Pollard is very good at putting that ball 5-6 meters out. He has the confidence to say, "I'm going to go right there." Yeah.
Which is why I asked the 7-1 question because potentially Pollard doesn't play. Yeah,
True.
Interesting. Yeah. We need to switch to Argentina. Los Pumas hosting the Wallabies over the next 2 weeks. La Plata this weekend and Santa Bay, I think, is the second one. It's an interesting old Wallabies squad that Joe Schmidt named, I don't know, a week ago or so. Only one open side flanker in it. Geoff, were you surprised by that?
Yeah, I was actually, and that's putting a lot of pressure and a lot of faith too. I guess it could be a bad thing and a good thing on Carlo Tizzano. So, but for a guy that's so new at this, and he's feeling his way. He hasn't played particularly badly, but he hasn't really set the world on fire either. He's made his tackles, which is a good thing, but. He hasn't offered a presence with the ball or anything like that.
He hasn't had a chance to get at the ball, to be honest. He's made 35 tackles without missing one, and he's hit 60 rucks already. I've done a little bit of a look into his first forays into test rugby for RugbyPass this week, and I couldn't actually believe the numbers when I saw them. His work rate is incredible, but he's been forced into tackles, Harry.
Yeah, so his evolution will be that he has to shed tackles and not make some tackles. It sounds weird, but he has to stand off the ball sometimes and get that position, almost like a referee position, and then able to pick the 4 out of 20 rucks that he goes into. Yeah. He's kind of I'm going to go to everything, which is understandable. He's young, so tackle everything that moves. People say that, but it's not really a smart thing for open sider. It's actually that Pocockian's skill of saying every 3 or 4, I'm going to feint and I'm going to come off. And the next one I'm going to go. And then the referee says, come off, David. And I'll go, okay. And then that third one, I go. And then you affect the flow of the phase attack against you. I think Carlos, look, his third test now. So we'll look for some improvement.
That's been the evolution in Fraser McWright's game, is that he is now picking his moments a lot better. And he, even only 2 years ago, was just going for everything and everything and everything. And he'd give away a penalty or he'd concede a yellow card. He's picking his moments so much better now, and that's why we've said it a few times now. He's the one player that Joe Schmidt really can't afford to lose, and he's going to be without him for at least another 2 weeks. So they'll get some back. Obviously, Nick Frost, Jeremy Williams will be back there. I don't necessarily know the one that plays. Tupou will be back. Yep. Tupou will be back up front, and that will make a big difference. I suppose just having 2 props on the field will make a big difference after the last half an hour in Perth, which is still an incredible way for a test to finish. What do you What's your thoughts, Geoff? What are you sort of expecting from
I
the
think
Wallabies?
there's a real opportunity here for the Wallabies to put it to the Pumas in the front five. But with Frost coming back, Lucan has been he's been playing really well. His work rate's up. He's been carrying well. So he's a very determined guy. He's got an opportunity here to, to get a sort of a permanent type role. So Frost, I know Joe Schmidt thinks a lot of Frost. You can see him maturing. He's still got that athleticism, but he's adding power to his game as well, and consistency. So with Tupou coming back, the Pumas scrum wasn't impressive in New Zealand. They got through that first match in Wellington and won without really having to scrum at all. And then when they did in Auckland, they were clearly second best. So I think this is a huge opportunity for the Wallabies to put pressure on the Pumas up front. And they need to, because when it comes to the loose forwards, I think break even would be a good result for Australia, given the strength of the Argentine loose forwards. So, but if they can assert themselves in the front five, then I think we've really got a game on our hands.
Yeah, and that's going to be where it's won and lost, I think, Harry, up front. And because if they can pressure the Argentinian front five like that, there's a flow onto that, and there will be a flow into the back row, and then there will be a flow onto the way they try and attack the Pumas. And we saw that the second game in Auckland.
Because of matchups in World Rugby now in the top 10, you really have to flip styles week to week. So what the Wallabies wanted to avoid 2 weeks ago, they will want to accentuate this time. They have the clear advantage in the tight five, except for at hooker. So if the Wallaby hookers can just stay there or thereabouts and not stuff it up, this is about creating a style of a match. And only the best teams can impose a style and say, we're going to play this way. The breakdown will not be as important as the set pieces, or the midfield will be our advantage. I think that's where Wallabies, if they're well coached enough, well planned enough, and they have the right stuff this time, I would see an upset. I would think they would go to Argentina. I think right now they would be classified as an upset and do it if they can create that style of match. Let the Pumas try to do too much, play too much, get spread out. The caveat to that is that's a hell of a midfield for the Pumas. And it's well settled. It's just behind, I think, the Bok midfield in sort of coherence, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they have a really knack of making some breaks. So I think that's where I would want the match not to be. I would say kick chase is going to be crucial for Wallabies. Yep. They've got to chase those kicks. Those kicks are not all bad. It's the chase that's been absolutely malpractice.
Yeah. Do you think Contepomi makes many changes after Auckland, or does he just go, all right, the New Zealand tour was the New Zealand tour, we won one, didn't back it up, now we start again?
Look, I'd be disregarding what happened at Eden Park. One thing the Pumas need to do is when they have a win,
work for Australia for 30 years.
They need to, not treat like that like the World Cup final, and so they've had a few days on the Terps. They haven't prepared properly for the second match. It's Eden Park's a graveyard for everyone. So, they were never going to win that match or really be competitive. So I'd just be putting a line through that if this, we were doing the form and racing. I'd be looking more to the previous start in Wellington. And that second half in Wellington, I know everyone wants to talk about the All Blacks all the time, but Argentina were hugely impressive in that second half. The loose forward machine really got rolling, the creativity in that midfield and then on the edge as well. It really was an impressive performance. So I think we're definitely going to see the good Pumas back for at least one of these tests and potentially both of them. But, if I'm Australia, I'm not totally scared or terrified about that. Like I said, you've got to target the areas where you're strong and then minimize your weaknesses and don't play to where they're strong. And I'm sure that's the way Joe Schmidt will be approaching it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what sort of team he does name. And you mentioned midfield there before, Harry. There's certainly going to be change for the Wallabies there, with Hunter Paisami being ruled out for the rest of the Rugby Championship. So there's almost certainly a debutant there at 12. I don't think they leave Lenny Kitau at 12. I think he's too important at 13. Do you think any different of that, Geoff?
No, and perhaps if Filippo Daugunu was available, he could come into 13. I don't think Callaway's a realistic. He could fill a hole at 13 as well, as he's done for the Rebels. But I don't
he's not starting test at 13.
Yeah, no, that's right. So I don't think they want to be doing that. So I think the way to approach it is Ikitau stays at 13. He's got 2 out-and-out 12s in the squad. As I wrote on the Raw this morning, he's still in this phase where he's casting his net, seeing who can play best rugby. So there's no reason why he won't give Hamish Stewart or David Filuai that opportunity to show what they can do. And neither of those guys is going to let them down. They're going to do a role. I expect it'll be Stewart. Stewart's been first choice into that squad. We don't know how they've been training or what's going on behind the scenes, but I'd be surprised if Stewart doesn't play. He's played over 100 Super Rugby games.
Yeah.
So, he's not some fresh new kid that doesn't know what he's doing. So
no. And as I've mentioned to you, Harry, we've mentioned numerous times, Hamish Stewart's been part of matchday warm-up, so he's in the system. He knows the style of plays.
Now,
I would think Joe wants a quicker ruck. So I think you can look at loose forwards for ruck, but you could also look at midfielders. And there's something about how the Reds were developing quicker ruck that I think he's intrigued by. The Joe Schmidt system doesn't work when there's slow ball. It is not going to work. It's never worked at any place he's played unless he can develop that. So I think that would be his focus even on midfielders.
Yeah. Geoff?
I was just going to mention about if Stewart comes in, I rolled a stat out in my article this morning that I only went back to 2020. So 4.5 years now, or 4.5 seasons, and we've seen 54 test caps, new test caps in 4.5 seasons. That is phenomenal, and a whole lot of them have come this year. And we're going to see at least another one on the weekend with either Stewart or Filuai playing at 12. So, we have to factor that in as well. This isn't a settled Wallabies side. They have, like I said, they've got these particular areas that they can play to where they know they're a bit stronger. But, this is still very experimental. And there's, we're looking at Argentina. Argentina are in a much better place with respect to their cohesion and their continuity.
Yeah, almost despite the way they come together as a squad, Harry.
Yeah, that's why it's so interesting. The opposites, the Pumas don't have a club competition to turn to domestically. But then you look at each player, Malia, Chocobaras, Sinti, the Carreras brothers, they are among the best players of their particular Montoya, best players at their particular clubs. Kramer, it's unbelievable, Montero. So they've taken sort of a team of stars. It's actually different from Ireland being a team of captains, all domestic, the team is king. Argentina is sort of celebrating all these stars and making it come together. And then without Alamano, Petty, they haven't started Lavanini. So it's actually
Petty's back.
Interesting. Oh, so that would be a big difference.
Petty's back. Yeah, he's come back.
And that's why I would say this at line-out. Wallabies got to watch out for Petty because wherever he is, that's the danger. He's one of the best line-out stealers because he doesn't even need a lift. He's that good off the ground, easy to lift. So, it's going to be a proper test for the Wallaby hookers.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll get into it deeper later in the week, I've got no doubt. Harry, Geoff, it's been fantastic to have you back on. It's been good to get into a couple of meaty topics this week, coming off the back of a quieter weekend, but there's always plenty to talk about. Always.
No, there is. It's been terrific, and I might go back down to that dinner that I was at. And
drag you away from.
And find a nice red if there's one left. And just have a quiet drink to celebrate David Nucifor's tenure in his role at Rugby Australia.
We barely knew thee. Thanks, mate. Great to talk to you again.
Always great, guys. We'll catch you again soon.
Cheers, Geoff. Thanks.
This is the 8-9 Combo Rugby Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones. And, mate, fantastic to have Geoff Parkes on again. I didn't even have any questions per se. I had 2 dot points, and it was literally just the 2 games. And there you go.
Hybrid versatility is all the corner of the realm in rugby right now, and Geoff is that. There's no one who knows Australian rugby better than Geoff, and there's no one who knows New Zealand rugby better than Geoff. And dare I say it, he also has a deep, he hides it, but he has a deep fascination with South African rugby, and it doesn't repeat old, tired, obsolete things about Springboks. So it's great to have him on as a wealth of information. And I'm going to feel sorry when we upset his favorite All Blacks.
You upset
tiny bit.
It will not be an upset.
Just about Geoff. Just for Geoff, like in Paris, I did kind of go, I'm sorry, fella. And I think he said something foul to me back, some profanity.
I'm sure it was deserved. A quick whip around the grounds. Made a lot less rugby being played around the world currently. Pacific Nations Cup started on the weekend. Fiji beat Samoa pretty comfortably in Suva, 42-16. But Eddie Jones has finally recorded a win with Japan. They beat Canada 55-28 in Vancouver. And that continues this weekend. I think we'll be all over that for games of the week later in the weekend. Curry Cup. Anything we need to talk about there for the weekend?
I don't want to talk about the Curry Cup. Let's just pretend the Curry Cup's not happening.
Oh, okay. So Province lost again. Okay, all right. No, gotcha. The NPC in New Zealand is interesting in that there is now 4 unbeaten teams. Still, after 3 rounds, Bay of Plenty have lost one. I beg your pardon. Hawke's Bay, Wellington, Tasman are all 3 from 3. But I think that ends this weekend for at least one of them. I think there's some crossover games there. We'll be back with games of the week later in the week as the Rugby Championship resumes with round 3, and then the Test match post-mortem is back in the early hours of Sunday morning, Australia and New Zealand time, with our first thoughts on matches before we really digest what happened. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe, and make sure you don't miss a minute throughout the Rugby Championship. The big headlines of the last 7 days, mate, has all been about assistant coaches, and we've sort of touched on both. New Zealand Rugby announced late last week that attack coach Leon McDonald had not travelled to South Africa and in fact had agreed to the old classic mutual parting of ways. And Scott Robertson had to concede that the former Crusaders and All Blacks teammates had significant philosophical differences regarding a style of play with the All Blacks. And got to say, it's raised more than a few eyebrows over the Tasman, this one.
Oh, it hardly ever happens when a team is successful in winning. So you can draw basically saying something was wrong, something wasn't working. And sometimes when you're a control guy and you think something's not working, you actually exert more control, which is what Razor just did. Now he's the attack coach. That doesn't usually work over the long term. And it's also a sign that there is pressure. The pressure just is in the hypotheticals. It's not about it's happening right now. Okay, first of all, you should never lose to Argentina and New Zealand. I get that part. But it has happened before. It's the specter of what Razor's looking at. The what ifs didn't appeal to him. And I think he just said, let me just take control of it. Now, that could backfire spectacularly because if they go lost, then it's going to be – there's no plausible deniability. I guess you could say, that's why I got rid of Leon. If they turn around with good performances, then you could expect that Razor would be, hello, it was me. So it does have a little bit of a political aspect to it.
Potentially. Potentially. Then on the weekend, the England camp was rocked by the news that Irish defensive guru Felix Jones, who Steve Borthwick poached from South Africa and who features prominently in Chasing the Sun too, had resigned, citing an unstable working environment, was the quote, is said to be linked to the sudden departure of influential head of strength and conditioning, Aled Walters, who only earlier this month announced he was switching over to Ireland. So things are not healthy in the England camp all of a sudden again.
It also presents the unlikely scenario that Rassie Erasmus is now a stable coach and more stable than Steve Borthwick, who we thought was kind of a meat and potatoes guy.
Yeah. And where it's got everyone guessing as to where he ends up next, Felix Jones, and he won't have any shortage of options. But there's also a suggestion that he might have a 12-month notice clause, and that the RFU might actually make him work it out, as in keep him on board. I'd be surprised if he stays on.
It's negotiable. Yes, you have to buy it out. So
he may well end up in some gardening leave.
It makes Felix more expensive. Does someone want Felix? Does someone need Felix at the moment? Maybe not exactly for the extra whatever $500,000, but it might come. So you could imagine Razor goes down 2-loss. He's looking around saying, "What do I want?" Felix was attack coach before he was defense coach. So I do think there's the rise of assistant coaches being more famous. We only used to know a certain amount. Now we know more. Felix has street cred. Maybe Borthwick didn't like that. Borthwick is apparently popular with his players because it's clear who's in charge and what they want. But now assistant coaches don't want to be treated like that. I think we're in a different world.
Well, it's because assistant coaches aren't really assisting anymore. They're running their program. They're running the attack. They're running the set piece. They're running the defense and collision. So, the assisting side of the role is sort of a bit of a misnomer these days. But as you say, it's been a rough week for assistant coaches. Final thoughts for the week, mate?
This is why we like rugby. This is where it's at. Yeah. I'm going to be deep in the sea of green. We're going to decide between white and green on the day probably, but just want to be not All Blacks. Visible. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a cauldron. And there's no doubt about one thing, which is we will remember that forever. If you go to a test like that and you're inside that and you feel it, I'll be sitting next to Ringo and the tribe. And we're going to come away hoarse and happy or completely speechless and sad.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. We'll be talking about it next week for sure and certain. But that is episode 29 of the 8-9 Combo done. Check the show notes for links to the 8-9 Combo on Twitter and YouTube, where you can find video versions of the podcast every week. And we've more than doubled our subscriber base since the start of the TRC. So welcome all of you and thank you. Leave us a rating or review wherever you can. And if you are subscribed to us on Spotify, make sure you've got auto download turned on in your settings. That means that you will not miss us for sure and certain. A brief chart mention, mate. Number 1 in the Netherlands last week we were. The new rising power of rugby. So
Goeiemorgen, Netherlands. We love you.
I don't speak Dutch, but thanks. Harry and I remain on socials in our usual places at Harry Baldy Jones and at BMC Sport. You'll find links on our socials to Harry's written work for the Raw a couple of times a month and my weekly columns for Rugby Pass as well. And don't forget to head to rugbypass.tv where you can see the 2019 series of Chasing the Sun, the first documentary series celebrating South Africa's 2019 Rugby World Cup win, and with the 2023 series, Chasing the Sun 2, coming soon. So sign up for free and watch it wherever you are in the rugby world. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realize you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And we'll be back in your ears in a few days' time with another Rugby Championship edition of Games of the Week.
Come play with us. No?
Better.
This is the 8-9 Combo Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones.